All right, I believe we're started. So hello, everyone, and welcome. Today is Tuesday, October 3rd. My name is Aaron Essery, and this is post-harvest vineyard care to talk about taking care of your vineyard after harvest. I am with Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I am the extension specialist for viticulture and enology. So we will just dive right into it. So post-harvest care. The main focus is vine stress relief and canopy rejuvenation. That's really your main goal right now, is to relieve any stress the vines may have been under, a heavy crop load, or maybe you were deficit irrigating to improve fruit quality. You just want to relieve that stress, rejuvenate the canopy, let it grow, let it flourish, let it photosynthesize. Lots of water, a little fertilizer. That's your main goals right now. So post-harvest care begins immediately after all the fruit come off the vine. Here in Oklahoma, it's pretty safe to say everything is harvested now by early October. If you're in colder parts of the country, like New Jersey or New York or Washington, you probably still have some fruit hanging. But post-harvest begins just immediately once the fruit comes off the vine, and it's usually between September or November, depending on where you are. So here in Oklahoma, we are in the midst of post-harvest right now. So some techniques for some post-harvest vineyard care. First and foremost is irrigation. After you pick everything off, irrigate pretty liberally. Lay down some fertilizer if you need, and then don't forget to mow and weed suppression. Always keep your under row herbicide applications going. At least a late season fungicide spray is not a bad idea, just to knock down any fungus that may try to fester here between here and dormancy. And also, I'll put this one at the bottom. Try not to make any cuts to the canopy. So after you harvest, just let your vines go. Give them lots of water, let them grow, let them sprawl, let them photosynthesize as much as they can, because right now, the grapes are putting all of their energy into storage for next spring. So while you're ripening fruit, the grapes are putting their energy into fruit development and fruit ripening, and they're producing quality fruit. Well, once you take the fruit away, all those starches and carbohydrates just go straight to storage. So the more canopy you have, the more photosynthesis the vine's gonna make. So I recommend not cutting the canopy. I mean, some people do just because it kind of gets a little out of hand, but I wouldn't make any cuts if you can help it. Let it photosynthesize. Put as much carbohydrates into the roots as possible, because here in a couple months, once they do go dormant, whatever they have stored in the roots now is what they're going to have come springtime. So right now it's all about putting starches and carbohydrates down into the roots for next spring. Okay, so irrigation. That's the first thing we'll talk about. So water is very important post-harvest. I do recommend after you harvest all the fruit, you give the vines a good drink. I mean, just open up irrigation, saturate your field, really just saturate it to field capacity, let it drain, let the vines soak up enough water, a lot of water, and then even maybe do it again in a couple weeks. Because irrigating helps maintain photosynthesis. Water helps transfer those sugars back from the roots to the leaves. You want to irrigate enough that you have a little new growth up here. Now, again, you don't want to just push it completely vegetative, but if you're seeing a little bit of new green leaf develop, that's right where you want to be. And to do this, you have to irrigate liberally. So just open the floodgates. I would say to field saturation once, maybe twice, and just keep them nice and watered and healthy. When you do go dormant, this last bullet at the bottom, irrigating in the dead of winter is a good idea too. I'm talking like December to March. So once you are completely dormant, if you turn on your irrigation a couple times a month, that's helpful too. You never want the vines to be like in a desert situation, even during dormancy. So from here until dormancy, which is post-harvest, liberal irrigation, and even at dormancy, a couple times a month is not a bad idea. As long as you're not like 5 degrees Celsius where pipes are bursting. But if you're at 0 Fahrenheit, if you're about 30 Fahrenheit and you can irrigate January, it's not a bad idea. Thanks if you're just joining. I'm gonna mute everyone just so. Okay. So liberal irrigation. This is a photo somewhere post-harvest, and they literally open the floodgates. So this is not a bad idea to do. I'm not saying do this all the time from now until dormancy, but if you did this once or twice, it's not a bad idea. Open it up, flood your vineyard, field capacity, let it drain out, let the vines soak up as much as they can. This is not a bad thing to do after harvest. Yeah, I don't know how they did that. They must have disconnected the drip irrigation somehow, and they can just open the valves. But again, it's literally a flood. Next slide. Okay, so root growth. This is important too. So post-harvest care is about expanding the roots and stimulating a little bit further growth. You need a lot of water to do this. Again, carbohydrates and photosynthesis are stored in the roots before dormancy. These stored carbohydrates is what's going to be used for next spring growth. So again, all the photosynthesis, all the starches that the vine is making now is being sent down into the roots, and then the vines will go dormant, and that's all they're going to hold until comes spring. And so whatever starches they have stored now is what they will use to break bud in the spring. You see, so they have to have some stored carbohydrates come bud break, which is late March, April, early April, because that's all they have to go on. It's only until once they develop shoots can they start rephotosynthesizing. I have one chat here, Aaron. How long water once a week? How long? Yeah, 5. Once a week is good. A good liberal irrigation once a week is sufficient from now until dormancy. Yeah, right there. So that was root growth. Next slide. Okay, so a lack of soil moisture. There was someone who didn't irrigate, and they were calling and asking and saying, well, after it comes off the vine, I don't irrigate. It's like, I would not recommend doing that. A lack of soil moisture will increase freeze damage possibilities. So a lack of soil moisture can cause winter freeze damage. It can cause erratic spring bud break come warmer temperatures. It can also delay further shoot growth. And then once you get into the next season, a lack of soil moisture now can prevent poor fruit quality or poor fruit set, lower yields, poor fruit quality, smaller cluster size. So again, keep the vines wet. As long as they have green tissue and they're photosynthesizing, keep them watered. I do recommend. Once it goes dormant, you don't have to water as much, but a little moisture still is nice. So a lack of soil moisture is not a good thing. I don't recommend not watering post-harvest. All right, so nutrients. Now we'll talk about fertilizers and such. So nutrients for the vine. Of course, I've said it quite a bit, and if some of you don't know, potassium is one of the major nutrients that will be pulled out of the soil from the vines because of fruit production. So approximately 5 pounds of potassium is taken out of the soil for every ton of grapes removed. So if you're harvesting 3 tons, that's 5 pounds a ton. That's essentially 15 pounds of potassium alone that's being pulled out of the soil at harvest. So potassium is one that gets removed from the vineyard with the fruit. A lot of potassium goes into fruit development. That's just how vines work. So potassium is one that really gets pulled out quite a bit. I would recommend applying, if you need, a fertilizer that's high in potassium and high in phosphorus. An example would be 3-12-14 or something similar. Or if you have a 0-46-0 that's NPK, that would be a 46% phosphorus. Maybe you can find something 0-0-46 that's just 46% potassium. You can mix the two and you can apply those together. But potassium and phosphorus are the 2 major nutrients that usually need to be addressed. A little bit of nitrogen is helpful, but grapevines really usually don't need a whole lot of nitrogen. Funny enough, they're just a plant that produces fruit. We grow these, we don't harvest the vegetative, we don't harvest the shoots, we harvest the fruit. And it's because of that the potassium is usually deficient. So nitrogen is really not an issue now, unless you're seeing chlorosis, unless you're just yellow. If your vines are just absolutely yellow, fertilize with nitrogen. but usually vines don't need a shot of nitrogen. I say a shot. A shot can be beneficial. Again, that 3 in the 3, 12, 14, that 3 represents nitrogen. A little bit's fine, but I wouldn't recommend fertilizing with a 20, 20, 20. You know, that's a lot of nitrogen. There's just no need. Also with that, I would not recommend applying nitrogen late into the season. Now is about the cutoff for nitrogen fertilizers. And the reason is because the vines are trying to go dormant. Nitrogen stimulates growth. And so if you apply nitrogen late into the season, like late October or November, the vine's going to take it up and think, oh, I got all this nitrogen now. I'm trying to go to sleep. You gave me nitrogen. It's a bad combination. So I don't recommend applying nitrogen late into the season. If you're going to apply it, I would really do it now, this weekend, really. That's about the cutoff. Some sulfur and lime, just if you're trying to adjust your pH, sulfur, elemental sulfur will lower pH, lime will increase pH, specifically calcium carbonate or magnesium carbonate. These things, you need a cation, you need an oxygen donor. It gets into heavy chemistry at that point, but a cation and an oxygen donor is what you need to increase pH. The quick answer is lime. So if you're trying to increase your pH, you put lime on there. If you're trying to decrease your pH, elemental sulfur is a good way to do it. Just another shot somewhere out in a growing field, a growing vineyard. That's a whole bunch of sulfur that they're just going to broadcast underneath. I pulled this off online. I didn't actually take this myself, but somebody ordered a dump truck's worth of sulfur and just going to go out and broadcast it. So that's kind of how you do it. You can, if you're trying to fertilize, just granular fertilizer under row is a safe bet. So just real quick on these, your NPK, your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. I don't know why I put phosphorus and K out of order, but it's NPK. Anyway, nitrogen, if you're going to apply nitrogens, apply it directly after harvest as quick as you can. Again, right now, this weekend is probably the cutoff for nitrogen application. I do not recommend applying nitrogen in November. It's too late into the season. The vines need to go dormant. If you need to fertilize with nitrogen, wait until March before you put any more out. Potassium, like I just mentioned, grapes pull a lot of potassium from the soil. That's just the fruit. That's the way they develop. So applying potassium post-harvest is recommended, especially if your vines are producing fruit. If you have a 10-year-old vineyard or even a 5-year-old vineyard and you're producing fruit every year, you're pulling potassium out of the soil, and potassium's a good thing to add. Phosphorus, the vines use phosphorus for photosynthesis and sugar metabolism. Rarely are vines deficient in phosphorus, but you can still apply it if you're a little low, especially if you had a soil test done and it's saying like, oh, my phosphorus is 80%, yeah, a little bit's not going to hurt. It'll help. So phosphorus is one too that's needed. If you're seeing purpling in your leaves, if your leaves have like yellow or purple, if your grape leaves have like a purple interveinal edge purpling, that's usually a phosphorus deficiency, just FYI. So if anybody's seeing purple in their vineyard, that's usually phosphorus. Here is a chart, how soil pH affects nutrient availability. So earlier I mentioned lime increases soil pH, sulfur decreases soil pH. If you look at the bottom of this chart on your x-axis, you have a 4.0, 4.55, all the way to 10. Ideally, somewhere between 6.0 and 7.0 is where you want to be. So if you have like a 6.3 pH, a 6.5, 6.7, that's about where you really, really want to be in an idealistic world. The way you read this chart is, so you have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, and then you have the iron, manganese, boron. The first top 3 NPK, that's your macronutrients. Those are your main nutrients you need. Sulfur, calcium, magnesium are secondary. The vine does need them, but it's not like, it's still a priority, but it's not as big as NP and K. And then from iron down, those are your micronutrients. Those are nutrients that the vine does need to complete its life cycle. Those are essential elements, but they're not like, Absolutely. They are necessary. I don't want to say they're not necessary, but they're not a huge priority. I think that's safe to say. Macronutrients in PK are your biggest nutrients you need. Your secondaries, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, you need those, just not as high as in P and K. And then your micronutrients are still necessary. You need those. They're just not as big of a deal. Anyway, this chart, what this is showing is that your soil pH, there's the simple pH of your soil, these nutrients are available or not available depending on pH. So let's look at 5.5. Let's just, as an example, if you have a pretty acidic soil, that's medium to strong acidity. If you have a 5.5 pH, you've got a lot of micronutrients, iron, manganese, boron, copper, zinc. You have those in abundance. You don't have a lot of molybdenum. And then if you look up at your primaries, you really don't have a lot of magnesium, calcium, phosphorus. The soil binds phosphorus, and the plant cannot uptake any phosphorus at a pH that low. It just has to do with chemistry of the soil, binding capacity, cation exchange capacity, these type of things. So if your soil is 6.5, you see just a 1.0 difference. You now have access to almost everything. Your nitrogen, your plant can uptake the nitrate form. You have phosphorus that's much more easily uptaken, potassium, sulfur, all these things are much more easily uptaken at a soil pH about 6.5. So this is just a neat chart to keep with you, keep in your back pocket. You can find it, you can just Google it online, soil pH nutrient chart, and it'll pull up. So this is why you adjust your soil pH if you need. Now, I've seen soils at 8.2, above 8.0, 7.7 to 8.2, where you're more alkaline now, and it's just different environments produce different soil pH. There's no wrong or right, but these are just things. This is nutrient availability based on soil pH. That's why you lime, that's why you sulfur, that's why you have to apply more iron in certain situations. I got to apply more nitrogen, more potassium, more calcium in certain situations. So it's again, no wrong or right. Ideally, 6.5 is where you want to be, but depending on your environment, where you are in the state or in the country, your soil pH will be different. Because of that, nutrient availability is different. So if you've never seen this chart, I hope you keep it, and I'll send out these slides later. But you look this up and just kind of keep it in the back of your mind as you grow. Okay. Yes, not the last thing, but don't forget to mow. This is something else. You don't want to let go. You kind of can let your vines go, but don't let your vineyard floor go. Keep your vineyard mowed, keep your under row herbicides, suppressed. So this is post-harvest somewhere, and it's just a good looking vineyard. The vines are very green, very healthy. The fruit's coming off the vine, floor is mowed, weeds are suppressed. This just helps the vine, take up as much water and nutrients as they can. If you have a tall floor, you got a lot of weeds and you got a lot of non-grapevine plants, you just have competition. So the less flora you have, the more your vines don't have to compete. You see, that's the idea. So sprays, I'll talk about a post-harvest fungicide spray. It's not a bad idea to apply one or two. One is probably good enough, but two is better. It's not a bad idea to apply at least one fungicide spray post-harvest, until dormancy. Because you have no fruit, because you have no fruit on the vine, you don't have to worry about post-harvest intervals. So you can spray Captan, Mancozeb, Zampro, Rally, Pristine, anything. It doesn't matter. Now's a good time, especially before the rain. I know we're probably forecasted for some rain. If you still have green photosynthetic tissue, if your vine is still pretty healthy, hitting it post-harvest with a fungicide spray is not a bad idea, just to knock down some of that fungus. And then if you see any of these clusters, get them out of your vineyard. And I don't mean cut them and drop them on the floor. That doesn't do you any good. I mean, like, cut them, put them in a bag, take them to the edge, like 100 feet from your vineyard, throw them into the woods, get them out of your vineyard completely, because these mummies, they fester diseases. They're nothing but a petri dish of fungus, really. So if you have any mummies like this in your vineyard, cut them, toss them out. It's just a good practice. So senescence, just a little grapevine biology. Senescence means to deteriorate. Those are your leaves falling. So this refers to the grapevines losing their leaves just before going dormant. Green foliage will begin to deteriorate. We've all seen it, leaves change colors, they fall, the vine's going dormant. So it's not a bad thing. It's just the natural cycle of the vine. So when you start to see senescence, you know that your vine is going dormant, and there is nothing more you can do to your vine until bud break come the spring. So once senescence begins, the vine will no longer photosynthesize. It will no longer accumulate starches, and everything that's going to happen to the vine has already happened, and it's going to go to sleep, and it'll wake back up again, come April or so. So senescence is just a natural process. You say goodnight to them, put them to sleep, and hope you send them into dormancy with as much photosynthesis as possible, or with as much stored carbohydrates as possible. And this is just a picture to represent. On the left is a vineyard about November. You see the red leaves, it's about to drop, go dormant. And then on the right is a picture in early February, and it's totally dormant. So I know you seasoned vets know this, but for those who don't know this is kind of the dormant cycle. So we're post-harvest, we've harvested all the fruit, we give it as much water as we can, we apply some fertilizer if needed, maybe one fungicide spray, and then it's going to start to senesce in late October, November, if you're cold enough. If you stay hot, it prolongs it, but you eventually come January, February, you're in full dormancy. And on the right is what a dormant vineyard looks like. So winter injury. Technically we are in post-harvest right now, but once you hit full dormancy, I want to talk about winter injury and some things that can happen. Winter injury can affect buds, canes, trunks, roots. It can hurt your vine if it gets too cold too quick, or if it just gets -20. That's pretty harsh on vines. So winter injury is a major cause for crown gall too. Acetobacter can get in, especially if your trunk splits, or if you have a knock on your trunk, or if it gets too cold and the vine just kind of cracks a little, Acetobacter gets in, and it's bad news. So crown gall, winter injury is a major cause of crown gall because of that. Primary buds. So again, you have dormant buds that'll bust come springtime, but if it gets too cold, or if it gets too cold too quick, primary buds are generally the first to be damaged, followed by your secondary and tertiary buds. And I can talk about bud assessment later, come January or February. But all your buds, which are next year's growing points, are actually compound buds. You have a primary meristem, a secondary meristem, and a tertiary meristem, all within one little bud on a vine. And they can be injured, because of harsh winters. Just FYI. So another reason to send your vines into dormancy happy. They need to, harden off as much as they can with as much starches to prepare them for the cold months. And low temperatures, I should say extremely low temperatures, can kill trunks and canes too. And I'm talking the phloem and the xylem can be damaged and be killed, and you can't transport any water or nutrients, and low temperatures can really harm a vine if not acclimated properly. So trunk damage. Winter trunk damage can include excessive suckering. If you see excessive suckering come spring, you might have a damaged trunk. Crown gall is a sign of winter damage. Trunk splitting on the right is a picture of a vine that froze during the winter and the trunk just split, and sometimes it can survive, but usually if you have a split trunk, it's only a matter of time before it's going to just completely die. So it's tough. Winters can kill vines. And on the left is crown gall. If you see a big festering, what that is Acetobacter. It's a bacteria that's in there that just causes cankers. It just causes galls. It's just a big festering mass of cankering galls that is Acetobacter. That's crown gall, and that's a disease that will eventually kill a vine as well. So trunk damage can happen if the vines are not properly acclimated, or if we're just hit -10, -20 Fahrenheit temperatures. It's just tough for a grapevine to survive that cold for long, at least. So acclimating to the cold. In a perfect world, where everything grows wonderfully, these are the 3 stages of acclimation. So grapevines need to gradually acclimate to the cold to tolerate max cold hardiness. Here in Oklahoma, we have erratic weather where it can go from 85 to 40 pretty quick. That's not doing you any favors. And then if it goes from like 60 Fahrenheit to 0 Fahrenheit, it's tough. It's just tough growing conditions for a grapevine. Sometimes it happens here. But an ideal world, the 3 stages of hardening off is shorter day lengths in the warmer fall weather, which is where we're at now. September, we've been 85, 90, we hit 90 Fahrenheit yesterday, but we have shorter day lengths, you see. So the vines are sensing less and less photosynthetic periods. They're sensing, the shorter day lengths. So they're trying to go dormant. You're going to have a little warm weather. That's natural. The leaves begin to senesce because of the shorter day lengths. The warm weather promotes hardening and increases metabolic activity. So the vine's kind of sensing, okay, shorter day lengths, I can still photosynthesize and push down starches to prepare for winter. And then you have some cold snaps. We're gonna get a cold front here in Oklahoma later this week. It's gonna hit about the forecast is 48 Fahrenheit on Friday. That's what I saw here in Stillwater, at least. We're gonna have a low of 48 Fahrenheit, a high of 77 Fahrenheit. It's just how the winter works. So shorter day lengths followed by cooler weathers. And then once you have some of those cooler days, if you hit sub-freezing, say just 25, 27 Fahrenheit, it starts knocking the vines down. They say, okay, it's really getting cold now. I can go dormant. And then after a few weeks of sub-freezing temperatures, if you hit 0 Fahrenheit, if you acclimate it properly, the vines can tolerate that. So a few days, I'm talking, this is, deep December, January. As long as the vines kind of gently went into the cooler weather, then they went into the freezing weather, and then it's like, okay, cold front's really coming in, 0 Fahrenheit. They can withstand it if they're properly acclimated. But what is the killer are these sudden drops in temperatures. If it's just, okay, yeah, we're going to hit 60, 55 Fahrenheit, and then next week it's going to be 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, that's rough. I'm sorry. That's tough on the vines. And then again, lack of soil moisture. Again, if you're not irrigating, I don't recommend doing that. Irrigate your vines as much as you can. I say as much as you can. Irrigate your vines liberally from now until dormancy, because the lack of soil moisture in the dead of winter is just harsh on the vines too. If they're nice and they're healthy and they're looking good, and then we have a sudden cold snap, as long as they're healthy, they have a better chance of surviving. Or if your vineyard's not looking so good, I have lack of soil moisture in the ground, I'm lacking N, P, and K, and my vines are kind of yellow from chlorosis, rather than senescence. It can be tough on the vines if it hits too cold too quick. So this is just kind of the acclimation for a cold winter. These are an ideal scenario. This is how it happens, and then you just keep your vines as healthy as you can until they do go full dormant, and then you just hope and pray they'll come back in the spring, and if you take care of them, it will. It's only really when you start neglecting your vineyard do you get problems. But as long as you stay on top of it and you do well and you pray and you do diligence, you'll have a pretty good chance of surviving the winters. So some strategies for managing cold temperatures. Again, late season irrigation. While you're still green, keep them irrigated, keep them healthy. Ensure the vines are as healthy as can be come dormancy. And then this is something for grafted vines. If you're growing grafted vines, like you have grafted vines, you have this scion crossed with this, not crossed, but grafted with this rootstock. Hilling up is a technique used. So hilling up is used to protect grafted vines. What you do is and there's a picture of it on the bottom right, you pack soil around the graft union for the dormancy. And that helps protect them from winter damage as well. Maybe you can go through and cover them. I've thought about like techniques. If you can cover your graft union with like insulation somehow, that's really what this hilling up is doing. You're covering the graft union to protect them from the harsh winters. Now, if you do this, you're going to have to unpack it come the spring, because if you keep it hilled up, it's going to push native scions. So don't keep it hilled up. You hill up You put soil around the graft unit to protect it in the dead of winter. But come February, March, probably March, you want to unheal and just make sure your vine knows that it's not buried permanently. You're basically just trying to insulate the graft unit before dormancy. That's a technique to use. And then wind machines. I know these are expensive, but a wind machine can help protect the vineyard as well, because a wind machine, you turn it on, and it's mostly an issue come spring when you start to break bud. But the idea is that you can move air around the vineyard, you can circulate some air, and it helps not be such a cold, stagnant temperature. So these are just some strategies for mitigating cold temperature. Again, if you're liberal irrigation from now until dormancy, and then if you have a grafted vineyard, hilling up or wrapping the graft union in some way is a good thing to do. Just be sure to unpack it come spring or before spring. And then, wind machines, heaters. I've seen people put propane heaters in their vineyard just to try to keep them warm. Bonfires around the vineyard, but that's like, springtime bud break type stuff, but still just some strategies. Okay, and that kind of brings us to the end. I will open it up now to questions and stop the recording. Thank you.